Hello everyone, this is Heidi, and I'd like to talk a little bit about gender. You might ask, Heidi, you've already talked about gender. Why are you bringing this up again? Then you also might ask, Heidi, why are you a purple stapler? In which case, I will respond, that's silly. I'm not a purple stapler. I'm actually just, I record these videos of me just like sitting there and talking to people, so I might, and they're not really interesting, so I might as well just be, variably interesting, aesthetically interesting objects for variety. Also, and as for the subject of gender, I feel that it's important to, bring up old things, because guess what? People learn things, and I have definitely learned things. For example, as I start my next bit as a slightly smaller stapler, I say, the last time I talked about gender, I said that gender was a construct. Well, that is debatable. I know that feminist theory dictates strongly that gender, in and of itself, is a construct. However, what I seem to have observed is that it's more so the roles and attitudes of what gender is that are constructed by society. Gender identity, however, is something a little bit more complicated. For example, in trans communities and any community existing outside of the gender binary, they would argue that gender is not a construct. But so far, I've mentioned gender attitudes, gender structure, gender, socialized gender, and gender identity. So you might ask me, who is currently now a whole punch of interesting variety, what does that have to do with gender itself? What does gender mean? What is gender? If I go by the Wikipedia definition of gender, it states that gender is a range of characteristics distinguishing between male and female, particularly in the case of men and women and the masculine and feminine attributes attributed to them. However, that seems a lot like, because Wikipedia is mostly edited by people who operate from the gender binary, that doesn't seem like a very valid working definition for me, or most people I know. By the way, I'm an umbrella. Of course, you might also say that it doesn't have to be so confusing. Western society has recognized that there are two separate genders, male and female, or masculine, feminine, etc. And if that bringing up the subject only confusing yourself only proves that you are wrong. You might say that in a very, interesting way. In which case, I will point myself accusingly at you and say, did you know that there are cultures outside of Western philosophy that recognize things such as 5 different genders? I won't list them because I don't know all of them, and to try and appropriate their language for my purposes without actually understanding what the hell they're talking about would be a dick move. At this point, I'd like to interject as myself as a crane and point out the fact that I just used gendered language. Dick move. That's probably one of the few examples of using masculine characteristics in language to symbolize something evil. Or at least lesser or not good. Usually it's female stuff that's used, but dick move, and dick bag, and a few other things are probably only a few examples of male negatives that I am aware of that are used commonly, at least. I'd list the female ones, but I don't really feel like going over that because they're quite negative. I guess this is a good point to bring up the fact that since gendered language is so important, because we use it all the time and we don't even realize it, I think that stands to reason that another factor in why gender and discussing gender ideology, all those other things is really important, because it's so prevalent in everything we do that most of the time we don't notice it, and that's why a lot of us have preconceived ideas of what gender is without actually even understanding or going into detail of why it means the way it does to us, etc. By the end of this video, you might realize that I don't really have any answers on this topic. And if I don't have any answers, you might ask, I wonder why a pair of scissors decided this was important enough to bring up. But I feel that, the fact that there is such confusion about what gender is when it's considered to be something that is so intrinsic to our identity, and essentially what is described as a way of fitting into life or whatever is so nebulous and confusing, then I think that it really needs to be considered. So I end this on a magical note because we have more questions than answers when I started this. Isn't magic fun? All gender isn't, but you get the idea. See you next week, and hopefully I might be human at that point.